Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Podcasting for Dummies, the companion podcast. It is so good to talk to you or see you again if you're watching us live over on twitch.tv/the-T-Monster. We appreciate everybody. There he goes. He's on the bell.
I'm on it.
One hits the bell. I am Chuck Tomasi, co-author of Podcasting for Dummies, and co-author number 2. No, actually, he's number 1.
In your hearts.
T. Morris is here again with me. How are you today, T?
I'm good. We're forging ahead. We're going to be talking about something that actually came up a few shows back, and I did tease it. I said we're going to cover that in a later show, and here we are. It's show notes.
Show notes, something that is easy to overlook, but man, it can lend value. We talked a little bit about this in ID3 tags too, about the listener experience or the viewer experience if you're streaming or have a video component to that as well. The show notes can make that experience so much richer, because if you're referencing a website or a product, you can provide a link to that and they can drill into that and go, oh yeah, I really wanted to look at that. Inevitably, if you don't, someone's going to ask, hey, can I have a link to that? No kidding.
Which is why you hear people say every time. And you know, there's so many of us that say, you know, we're gonna put something in the show notes, and that's something you'll notice about show notes is that they differ from podcaster to podcaster to podcaster.
Oh yeah.
Some people believe in brevity being the soul of wit. Some people go, you know what? I'm going to go into excruciating detail and time code every bullet point that I've got here, or they'll somehow find at least what I do, which is the happy medium. I'll go on ahead and I'll be like, okay, I'll give you a time when I'm doing when I've changed the topic of discussion, but I'm not going to time code everything because that's going to take me way too long. But I noticed that apart from editing, show notes is what takes me the longest time, because I try to encapsulate what I'm saying and what I'm talking about in that moment in like one bullet point. And sometimes that's easy. Sometimes it's not. I'm having a bad hair day now.
Where possible, I like to put the work of a podcast on the prep work so that the actual delivery and the post-production is not a burden. That's not always possible. If like this show, I'm going to go through and edit out a few ums or stammers or coughs and put in the intro and the outro. While I'm listening, I'm making notes about the time code. So I have to do some post-production there.
Right.
In the case of something like Technorama, Craig and I have already gathered up the stories we want to talk about.
That's true.
On Saturday, I'm putting together the notes for On This Day in History, so we just read them.
Yeah.
And then the show notes really become a copy-paste exercise because the work is already been done. Right. We don't put time codes on there, unfortunately, but we do have every link to every story we talked about. Right. Even the ones that we didn't get, we go, okay, we're running a little short on time. We're going to skip over the Geek Library. But hey, go check out the video that we posted. It's in the show notes on episode 630 over at the top. Not the top. Wow, mixed up my shows. That's what happens when you podcast too many. It's like having too many children. You call them by the wrong name.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with what we do at Happy Hour from the Tower. One of the things that we like to do is, as we're talking, we tend to reference different video clips. If we're talking about a recent trailer that dropped from Bungie, we will take that trailer from Bungie and we will embed it into it. And that's the beautiful thing about show notes, especially with some of the new WordPress plugins that are out there. The new plugins make it insanely easy, absolutely insanely easy to embed tweets, to embed clips, audio clips, video clips. I mean, it's great. It's great. And sometimes, I have to, when I'm listening, sometimes I'll make a mention of something and we'll be like, oh yeah, we can put something in the show notes on that. So it's almost like an after, unlike Chuck over here, chat, where he has everything planned out. Happy Hour from the Tower, we're like, we take a topic and then we kind of run with it, and then we see what the different concepts are. And that's why during the listening phase, I'm gonna be like, oh, I should put the note here, I should put a note here. And the other great thing about show notes, depending on how much detail you go into, is you get a chance to share love with some other people. Like I know when we mention Big Marvinsky in the show, we always link back to him. If we don't link back to him, we link back to one of the shows that he's done with us. So that way people get to meet him and get to see him in action. When we get a chance to, when we reference a tweet that somebody said, if I can find the tweet, I will embed said tweet into our show notes. And that goes back to the enhancement experience. Now, some show notes don't always lend themselves to that. When we did Tales from the Archives, my wife and I, all we had to do was come up with a 4-line summary of the short story that we were podcasting. Those were our show notes. And we would, but that was it. We didn't really want to, go and do a bullet list of all the things that happened in the short story. We would give links, of course, to where people could find books, where people could find this author's books, and little things like that. But that's where the approach of show notes differs, because there are going to be some instances where you do want to go into detail. There are going to be somewhere where going into detail is kind of counterproductive. So you want to make sure you figure out from your podcast what are the best approaches for your particular podcast.
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all by any means, but take a look at what other podcasts are doing. Like many other things in podcasting, it's okay to be inspired and say, "Ooh, I like that." They do a similar show. They give a lot of details, a lot of links. And what was that? Wasn't there a service or some kind of backtrack, ping back? Where if I link to your website, T, you would get a notification that says, "Hey, Chuck has made a link," and it kind of like an @mention on Twitter. It goes,
yes,
"Hey, somebody mentioned you."
And WordPress still does that. And we make it. I get alerts when I ping back to my own episodes. I mean, thanks WordPress. But like if we mention other podcasts, we will go on ahead and we'll give shout outs to them as well, and we will link back to them. Now some of the approaches that I admire, but I just don't have the energy to do that. I've seen like in there's a friend of the show's, and they also do the bell on links as well. Geek Radio Daily. Those guys would time code every bullet point. And I admire them for doing that, but man, that's a lot of hard work. That is a lot of hard work.
I've been recently doing more of that for the videos so that we can put those in the YouTube descriptions and then click and go to that specific spot. And if I make it part of with YouTube, it's easy because I can just double speed it and go, yep, 3505, boom, write that down.
Right.
But I make it part of my editing process with the podcast. When I go and edit this one, I think I mentioned this in an earlier episode, go, oh, we pivoted from this topic to that topic at this time. It's just part of the edit process.
Right.
I'll be listening and go, okay, there's no coughs, there's no extra long pauses that I have to take out. But hey, we switch topic, make a note. So as you're making notes, then it just becomes part of the editing process. It's not an undue burden on top of that.
Now, the question is, though, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to, if you're changing topics or if you're doing a new segment, why would you want to put the time code in there? So Chuck just recently discovered this with Overwatch. Sorry, that's a video game. With Overcast. I discovered it many moons ago when I first started using Overcast, and I said, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this like as much as I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you use the app Overcast, and I'm not aware of any other podcast apps that do this. I would imagine they would, because why wouldn't you? But if you take a time code, like if you do it like 10:25, 10 minutes, 25 seconds, or 1:10:38, 1 hour, 10 minutes, 38 seconds, just as an example. And you don't have to add anything. You just type that out in that format. Overcast will look at that and go, oh, that's time code. And you can tap on your phone and you will jump from wherever you are to that specific time point. I remember the first time I did that, chat, I'm not exaggerating. I did it 5 times just to make sure that thing really did work. Because it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in an app before. Because now I didn't have to worry about any kind of special coding or anything. I just had to adhere to this time format and then jump to that. And I know that Chuck just recently discovered that. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of the reasons why I swear by Overcast. Because there's no coding necessary. You just have to use that format for your timestamp. And I did it again. Overcast takes care of the rest, and I love that. I absolutely love that. And this is also a great service that you can offer your listeners, because then they can now jump from one to the next to the next to the next. Now, what about the embedded media? Sometimes mobile apps will pick up on that and read it just fine. Some apps are not that sophisticated. So you've got to find out, like, for example, you can't see the show notes on Spotify. So the question is, well, then why am I even bothering to work on them? That's why you hear so many people in your podcast say, check out the show notes for more. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that the same thing you do with your other podcasts and with Technorama?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. Yeah, it is. The topic is Trek. We've kind of made a meme out of it. The topic is Trek.com. We won't say the .com until you hear the bell.
Right. Exactly.
So check out our show notes. As soon as somebody says check out our show notes, I got my finger on the bell button. I'm ready to go.
Right.
Because we've got every week there's so much new stories about Star Trek. We cover 6, maybe 8 in the show, but there could be 50, 60, 70. I think our record was over 100 other news stories that we couldn't cover. We say, look, we've got stories about Will Wheaton doing this and Jonathan Frakes doing that, and somebody built this. Go check out all the 104 stories over at our show notes for episode 729.
Right.
I wish we were that high. And you just remind them, we've got this other set of library information that they may want to go browse. Now, I'm certain that most people, I know that most shows that I listen to that have show notes, I don't visit them, but occasionally they're going to pique my interest on something, go, I want to know more about that. I want to dig in further. I want to read that story word for word, because
I think that's where you and I differ. I think it's where you and I differ. I do. I make it an active point to go and visit the show notes, because
you drill through on
I do, okay. Man, I do, and I'm very disappointed when I go to a podcast and they don't have any, or they have just a brief little summary of the episode and that's it. Maybe it's because I'm an old fart. I don't know, but I like to leave comments. I like to check out the show notes, especially, and I would imagine. But the topic is Trek, especially if you're talking about something very specific, like a specific scene, like what's your favorites? Like, let's say, for example, in the topic is Trek, what's your favorite Scotty scene? And then I could see it where in the show notes you would have a quick YouTube clip. They'll be like, well, this is my favorite Scotty scene. Because let's be honest, YouTube has come so far because there's so much stuff you can find. I'm sure if we wanted to, we could go right now and find my favorite Scotty scene. From the original Star Trek, which is where Scotty's getting the alien drunk, and the alien, and he goes, we can drink this, and he goes, what is it? Well, it's and he stares at it and he goes, it's green, right. and there was the reason, one of the reasons why that is one of my favorite scenes from Scotty is when James Doohan appeared on Next Gen. He's in 10 forward with Data. And he goes, what's that stuff? And he goes, well, and Data stares at it and he goes, it is green. And I was like, I absolutely lost it. I was just like, oh my God, thank you. But the thing is, in show notes, you can share those granular details. And that's the stuff that I look for in really good show notes, because they become more interactive. I love to call my wife the GIF queen, because she throws in all kinds of wacky GIFs into our show notes, and it's redonkulous, some of the stuff that she comes up with. Like, I'm like, oh my God, you found some awesome. Like, she actually found one I can't even remember what the topic was, but it was for she handles the show notes for the Shared Desk. And one of the show notes, one of the gifts she dropped in was Donald Sutherland at the end of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where he does the and I just was like, yeah, and I was like, oh my God, honey, that's fantastic. So yeah, I think show notes is almost, it's a bit like a static version of Discord. The show continues on even after the show wraps up. That's to me what show notes are, because they give you a jumping point to somebody else. The other thing that show notes can do, and this is why I stress in them and why they're so important, is that with show notes, you're actually giving people an action item. As soon as you're done with listening to the podcast, I want to bring them to our site. And that is the goal of any kind of social media outreach, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, podcasting, streaming. You have to give people a destination. And I always say, my destination is my website. That's where I want people to go.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a call to action in there.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I've learned. I'm not a marketing person, but I work in marketing, and they're a lot smarter than me. So get a call to action to go to your website or check out this product or whatever it happens to be. That's where the value of your podcast goes up. Right.
And once you're done putting together all your show notes, whether it's in Libsyn or whether it's in WordPress, one of the things that I do stress to people, if they're new to this, is make sure that you're linking the show notes somewhere in your interface. It can be a WordPress plugin. It'll already be built in with Libsyn. But you're going to want to make sure that you're pointing people to the right location for the right show. You want to make sure that, because otherwise you're just making a blog post.
It's just this big document.
Exactly. That's the God's honest truth. That's God's honest truth. Don't forget the podcast. Because once you're done, then you have the option of saying, okay, I'm done with my show notes. I have linked it to the file. I got the green check mark verifying that I'm pointing at the right file, and the file is on the FTP server, and everything's fine. Now, here's an extra step, and I'd be curious if this is something that Chuck does. I always go into preview mode before I go into.
Always. I see too many bizarre things afterwards. Like, crap, gotta go back and edit it.
Like what? Like what? Like what? I want to hear some of your horror stories. I mean,
I missed an entire embedded video.
That'll do it.
Those aren't the bullet items I put in. What happened?
Isn't that fun?
Wrong, or I'm missing a section. Especially, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just that old man who's not getting up on the change. But when they changed WordPress's main editor to this sectionalized thing,
oh, the blocks.
I am having more frustration with that.
I'm
getting a little better at it, but I'm really looking for a video that goes, here's how you use the WordPress 5 editor. But or flip a switch and go back to the old way, because I can write HTML in my sleep, but for some reason I can't master this user easy editor.
The weird thing about the new WordPress interface with the blocks, it's so easy, it's made it hard. Yes. And I've had to sometimes do some really weird, like redundant things. I'll delete that later. And that's why I go into preview mode. Because sometimes preview mode will either try to reformat something that looks completely wrong, or it will just do it will do something that WordPress says no bueno, and I got to figure out, okay, well then I'll just copy this. I'll copy this block. I mean, what I used to do just to keep the formatting consistent is I would just go to an old post, select it all, copy it, paste it into the new one, and then just re-edit as I go. That was simple, but now I can't do that anymore. Right. It's ridiculous, and then
different thing. I don't know if I'm being inconsistent or it's being inconsistent, but
it's
bullet lists are driving me.
Oh, bullet lists can be the worst, and that is where I try very hard. And then the worst bit is you've got this beautifully edited bullet list all done, and then when you go into preview mode, you suddenly realize, oh great, the template I have doesn't recognize the bullet list indents. fantastic, you know. So you just have to sometimes roll with the punches in that, but that's why you always go into preview mode. And I always play the opening of the show just to make sure it's the right show and that it's all there. So yeah, you just have to don't go live just yet. And then comes the next step.
Before I do that, I do one more thing as I'm putting the show notes together. I have the page from the last show notes so that I make sure I get these things in the right order.
Right.
And my titles are consistent, because honestly, our Podcasting for Dummies blog titles are not the easiest thing to remember. What format? Was it PFD : this? Was it Podcasting for Dummies? Podcast? Was it? Where did we put the date and the episode number? I don't remember. So I always have a tab with last episode up there. And then I go, okay, it was picture, title, paragraph, what bullets, media player. You get them consistent. Consistency is important, especially
consistency is very important with show notes.
Page 2, page 3. So if you've got a templated way of doing that, beautiful. Do that. Maybe that's something that these hosted providers provide. But again, we're still kind of rolling our own cigarettes here.
Yeah, that's a great mental image right there. I love that. So we now talk a little bit about the we talk a bit about boosting search engine ranks with good show notes. One thing I do recommend, it may take a long time and it's a tiny little detail to do, but there are tags that you can that you can enter in, just keywords that people can find, and you see them on Happy Hour from the Tower. Maybe not so much on the shared desk, but you do see them on Happy Hour. And what's really nice is once you use a tag for your blog, WordPress and other blog engines will remember the old tags, which is why you want to make sure they are spelled correctly before you use them.
Kind of like those URLs I mistyped.
Exactly.
Throwing it back in my face.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you want to use those tags because those tags help people figure out just at a glance what they're looking for. Plus, also when people do searches, whether it's on your blog or across many blogs, they'll know what you're specifically talking about. They also come up with one of the things we do cover in the book is we talk about something that I refer to lovingly as the dark arts of the internet, search engine optimization. Here's my 2 cents on search engine optimization, and Chuck, you're more than willing to stand toe-to-toe with me on this. I give a hard pass to SEO when I read a post or I read notes, and they're written in English, but I still have no effing clue what you just said. Because I've seen it. I've been given blog posts that have been optimized for social media and optimized for SEO, and I take it to my boss and I read it, and he goes, I remember one time I did that at Stratford. He looked at me and was like, "T, what the hell did you just read?" And I said, "I read what's supposed to be our next blog post, and I'm not posting this because this is crap." And he was like,
"It's like some AI generated."
Yeah, it was. It's like a Chuck Tingle novel. It's a Chuck Tingle novel, but just without the obvious things that make Chuck Tingle. But my really steadfast, unmovable opinion on SEO is that if it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to use it just for SEO. I mean, are you good with that, Chuck, or am I completely having an old man get off my lawn moment?
I may not be the most successful person when it comes to SEO, and anybody who comes up to you and says, "I can optimize your website," I get one of these emails about once a week.
Yeah.
So, let me help you increase your SEO. It's like, yeah, fine. No.
Go away.
Almost a secondary thought. If it happens that I mention, something in my blog that catches an engine, great. But like you, I want to make it friendly, appropriate, contextual, readable to whatever human is coming along and reading that. If I happen to slip in a tag or a keyword that works for me, great. But it's kind of a byproduct.
It's more about, and it's funny because Marv just said I can actually fix your SEO though. I wish I had $20 for every time someone has said, I can actually fix your SEO. Because man alive, have I heard that said and said to me often. But my thoughts about, like, for example, we're talking about, titles and things. Like episode 70 for Happy Hour was called Welcome to Season of the Chosen. Pretty much straight up right there. Episode 69, Dudes. Season of the Hunt and Deepstone Crypt with Raid Maestro, the Big Marvinsky. And what I like to do when it comes to, and I have no idea if this messes with my SEO, or if it actually helps my SEO. When Beyond Light dropped, we did a show about it, and I called it episode 68, Blinded Beyond the Light. And it was just a nice little play on the probably one of the most misquoted songs ever in classic rock history. But you get where I'm going with this. I like playing with titles in that, and we go into the book about, if you really want the SEO, if you really want your visibility to punch up a bit, then you can attempt that through the titles. But what about you? I mean, I know you do the same thing, Chuck. You have really, like, play on words kind of titles. Have you never noticed if that strikes a nerve, or if it doesn't, or if it's just something you guys just laugh at amongst yourselves?
We're just doing it out of whimsy. Our Technorama titles have nothing to do with the show. It just, Craig comes up with these drug-induced titles, and it's fun to play with. We don't even announce them anymore. It's just part of the show notes, or it's the show title. If you on YouTube, people say, I'm taking up space in college. We may talk about space in the show, but we do that on purpose. It's kind of like the old Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoon when they used to close it out.
Oh, and they always have this.
Yeah, and the title of the next show is not what they talk about, and
And the worst thing is, I was the kid that when I tuned in to Rocky and Bullwinkle the next week, I'm like, wait, that's not what they were going to call it. And then when I got older, I was like, oh, I get it now. Oh God, I'm an idiot.
Now that's the Technorama thing.
Okay, fair enough.
The topic is Trek. We have some fun with that one too. It may have something to do with, if an Orion person got killed, we'll make a play on words about green or Orion.
It's not easy being green. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So we'll have fun with that one. For my work podcast, it is straight-laced, and the title is what the title is. It is what the subject is. Here we're having a conversation with customer Maria Gabriella, or we're talking integrations with Josh Narius, because I want my customers to know from the title, as they're browsing through the list of episodes, that's the one on integrations. That's the one on the Orlando or Paris or Quebec features. They can get what they get out of the list, and that makes more sense.
That does make more sense.
It's not a whimsical thing. It is a business thing, so I'm making it more business-like.
So what about we mentioned it in the book, backlinks. You specifically, because backlinks for me have been one of those. It's a kindness. That's the way I always looked at it. It's a kindness, but where do you feel like backlinks can really help with the visibility of your show?
Like I said before, it's kind of like an app mention in Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever you want to do that. Somebody is going to get alerted, hopefully, that they have been mentioned, and then socialize your show a little bit more. Right. So you're getting a bit more reach than you normally would. So if I link to Happy Hour from the Tower off of Technorama, T gets there, and with any luck, maybe he says, hey, appreciate the shout out on Technorama last week. You might want to go have a listen. It's a fun podcast about blah, blah, blah. Because the number one, I'm convinced of this, the number one way people find your podcast is from other people telling them.
I would agree.
Personal testimonial on any podcast. I will experiment with many podcasts and go, oh, you know what? Somebody said they liked that. I'm going to give it a listen. I may not stick with it. I may not subscribe, but I will give it a listen. That is way better than any search engine that I've ever found.
Well, that's also word of mouth. I mean, word of mouth will always be the world's greatest promotion. because people will tune in if someone else endorses your podcast. I mean, that was regardless, that was what made Harry Potter Harry Potter. Just
like in business, your customers are your best advocates. They're your best salespeople.
Yeah, they are. And it was one of the things I heard about when it comes to like restaurants. I think this is what Pip once told me. She said, "Yeah, we don't complain about restaurants in New Zealand, but if we like a restaurant, we will obviously tell maybe 3 or 5 of our friends, and that's always nice. If we don't like a restaurant, we will thank them for the service. We will thank them for the food. We will go home and we will tell 10 of our friends that restaurant was absolute suck." And that's the thing.
Yeah, you do that with restaurants. It seems like there's a lot more negative PR than there is positive.
And that's why I always tried that is why I do the opposite. I try very hard to tell like as many people as possible, "Oh my God, this restaurant is fantastic." If I don't like a restaurant, I don't mention it. I just do not mention it. And it's the same thing with books, and the same thing with podcasts, and the same thing with streamers. If people really enjoy my stream or my podcast, I go, "Do me a favor, tell 10 of your friends."
Yep.
Tell 10 of your friends. If you really don't like this, but if you really don't like this stream, or if you really don't like my podcast, then all I have to say is, "Thank you for listening anyway. My name is Chuck Tomasi, and you're listening to Technorama. Good night." And that's it. That's the end of it. I'm good. It works perfectly for me. But you get the idea. I mean, the notion that when you get backlinks, it is the most sincerest form of flattery. Now,
that's one podcaster telling another podcaster that, "Hey,
I dig your work.
It jives with me. Appreciate the love."
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
And once you've got all this, once you've got the title, once you've got the show notes written, once you've got everything put together, the last thing that you have to do on WordPress or and on Libsyn as well is, are you going to go live or are you going to schedule it? Now, I prefer scheduling. Scheduling.
Yeah, there's very rare opportunities where I have to post something immediately, but it usually around my schedule, because I say, "Hey, this podcast comes out every Tuesday, or this podcast comes out every Friday. I probably don't have time during my workday to do my hobby, so I'll be doing that on the weekend."
Right.
So I work through Podcasting for Dummies on Saturday or Sunday, schedule it for the Tuesday, and then I know it's released. It also gives me a little more safety net should I need to change something.
Exactly.
"Oh, I totally forgot this one bullet item," or I used the wrong title, whatever it happens to be. You could go and fix it before it becomes public. Sometimes you're caught by that. But it gives you more a distance between. It's not such an emergency like, "Oh my God, I gotta release this tonight because it's Tuesday night and this is when I do podcasts and I'm way behind." So
it's the same. No, but and I agree. I always aim for Tuesday, and I chose Tuesday for Happy Hour from the Tower. I chose that because that's reset day, so there's new content coming out or what have you. And if we have to move our recording session, which we just did recently, from Sunday to Monday, that's when I'm like, that show's going to be late. And then that's when I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this live as soon as it's done. And that can be hard. That can be very hard to do. But
it raises the stress level.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. You don't. Yeah.
Relax your schedule.
But the other thing is that you've got to find which one works best for you. Now, this is a little thing that I tend to do because people have asked me. They're like, I just got this notification that you dropped in a podcast, but it's like going live and that's the thing, when your podcast goes live, it's when the blog post itself goes live, because the podcast is attached to the blog post, and getting into the nuts and bolts of RSS feed. Once that goes live, the RSS is generated, and now everybody's got it. Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, all these different places have got it now. When it goes live, though, I have mine go live like on Tuesdays between 4 and 5 a.m. And people think what's all that about? It's for folks like the Big Marvinsky. Because when you're overseas, I'd rather have you get the new podcast like in the afternoon or in your late morning, afternoon, or evening, as opposed to waiting until, we're talking, hey, it's Tuesday, it's Reset Tuesday, and you're already in Wednesday or you're asleep.
Right.
That way, I feel like I get the drop when I do it here, and the best part is that it's super early in the morning, but for those folks in America, they wake up and they go, oh, hey, I got a new podcast, and you're ready for the morning drive. And so that's the strategy I have when I schedule. That's
a good point.
Yeah.
About scheduling. If it's time sensitive, if you're doing something that's undated, you want to say, hey, this show is for Wednesday, February 20, whatever it is, 30th.
Right.
There's no February 30th, but it must be the end of this marathon recording session when I start doing stuff like that. But if you do that, think about what time of day you want that to be released to the public.
Right.
And also remember that everybody's podcasting client isn't checking every minute.
That's true.
It may take several hours for their client. Yeah. I wake up sometimes I wake up, I've got many of my work podcasts, a couple that I do for fun, release at midnight Pacific time.
Right.
Well, if I get up at 7 a.m. and it's not on my client, I go, ooh, swipe refresh time? Come on, what's going on? Did I make an error? So think about that as well. We do Technorama, I forget what time Craig releases it, something like 10 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday, because it's a Wednesday show for the same reason.
Right.
We have people that are finishing their day in Australia at this point. We want to make sure they get it on Wednesday because it's a Wednesday show.
And and you also bring up something else worth mentioning too is, even if you're scheduling it, whether it's with WordPress or whether it's with Libsyn or some other service, after you schedule it, make a mental note that morning when you wake up, to just don't check the podcatcher. Don't check the podcast client. Check the blog itself. If your blog hasn't updated, you might need to go in and just double check because the WordPress scheduling tool is not infallible. A couple of times I've noticed it's like, wait a minute, where's the podcast? And it's always the mornings that I don't check. So
my favorite is I said 12 p.m. instead of 12 a.m.
Yeah.
Darn it again.
No.
Because something about that new interface, you're picking the time and it jumps around on you. It's like, I got the date and the time changed back to what?
So just be patient with that. Just remember, Chuck, when you approach it, just go, I am not as smart or not as dumb as WordPress thinks I am. And once you do that, you'll be able to handle that new block interface just fine.
Look, if they had a REST API, I'd write another program to talk to it.
Amen. So, Chuck, did you want to take us out on anything specific about show notes or about the final steps before going live?
No, we had
I think
a
we
good
covered
time.
It all.
There was
we did.
Information, good details that didn't make it into the book, and that's why we want to bring you this podcast. And as always, tell somebody else if you enjoy this. If you didn't, well, we apologize and have a nice day.
Thanks for listening to Welcome to Night Vale. Good night. I gotta say real quick. I got that joke from Disney. And I've gotten so much mileage out of it. It was a joke when we were taking the Jungle Cruise, and the guy's like, "Hey, if you really enjoyed this, my name is Dave, and you've been on the Jungle Cruise. If you didn't like this raid, I'm Steve, and thanks for riding Space Mountain. Have a good day, everybody." And ever since then, I have used that. I think the biggest reaction I got was, if you've enjoyed this talk, my name is T. Morris. Thank you for watching The Big Score. And if you don't like the talk, my name is Will Wheaton. Thank you very much for this retrospective on Star Trek. Good night. And I did that at an event that Will Wheaton was at. I was really hoping someone was going to get it back to him. No one ever did. But I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it until it happens.
Adding that to my repertoire.
There we go. All right.
When you get up on stage and you make a blunder, you go, it's okay. Don't call 911 yet. Get that from the amazing Randy. He was stammering at a TED talk, like, ooh. When an old guy does that, it's kind of funny. So, the older I get, the better it gets.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, let's take us out. Podcastingfordummies.com is where you can find our book, this podcast, the embedded video. If you didn't get a chance to watch this live, please have yourself some fun and watch the raw stuff. We do a little bit in audio. There's even some things that you may not get in the audio at all. You can call our voice line with WhatsApp, Google Voice, or good old mobile, 703-791-1701. Of course, you can find Podcasting for Dummies wherever you find your books, online or in store. We got that wonderful picture of somebody with Podcasting for Dummies and Twitch for Dummies.
That's awesome.
Still glowing about that. That was awesome. I love it when we see the book in the wild. You can join us live. I mentioned the live stream. We do this periodically. Subscribe to twitch.tv or just follow twitch.tv. The T Monster is where you can find our live stream.
I don't mind if you subscribe. I don't mind if you subscribe. I don't mind at all.
Money. Finally, Podcasting for Dummies, the companion podcast, is protected by Creative Commons, non-commercial, no derivatives, share alike, United States 3.0 license. You can find out more at creativecommons.org. For the T-Monster and me, Chuck Tomasi, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Take care. Stay safe. Stay warm wherever you are and whenever you are. And please, pod on.